So let's talk about some of its key problems. The first is bias, right? Remember in the previous image, we were showing you all the data that gets fed into the large language model. If that data has biases, those biases are likely to be reflected in the large language model and its output. So, for example, a lot of these large language models were created using data that was taken from the website Reddit. Because it's free information, there's a whole bunch of it. They took all of the publicly available information from the website Reddit, they fed it into the large language model, and then they found when they started interacting with it and asking it for output that that large language model was now reflecting some of the biases of the users of Reddit. So if the users of Reddit tend to be from one particular demographic more than others, let's say young, white, middle class men, as Reddit tends to be dominated with, then the biases of those particular people can be captured and reflected in the output from those large language models. And so it's not an objective source of information just because it's not a human being. It also has hidden biases within it, as we saw in some of the earliest models that would be sexist, racist in a very troubling and problematic way. And so the companies that created these programs had to create safeguards around them. They had to deprogram some of the problematic biases of the large language models. So it's just important to remember that it doesn't produce objective information. All information comes from a point of view, even information that's generated by ChatGPT. It just kind of obscures the bias. You're just not sure where the bias is necessarily coming from. So there's, again, no guarantee about its objectivity. Another key problem is hallucination, which is just the fabrication of outright incorrect information. It just gets things wrong. And I'm sure you've probably encountered this in your own use of AI. The problem is if you don't verify it, if you don't double check its work, it's hard to tell when it's getting things right and when it's getting things wrong. And I actually see this all the time, unfortunately. And I'm assuming it is from when students have very little time to double check their work and they're using things like ChatGPT. They're trusting the ChatGPT rather than verifying its output. And ChatGPT is giving them completely fabricated sources, or it's inaccurately interpreting information from a source. Those would be considered hallucinations. And in the previous video, I mentioned retrieval augmented generation. And how that can help reduce hallucinations. It's still not perfect, as these two studies here that I'm going to just briefly show you. 1 out of 6. These are studies on very expensive legal tools like ChatGPT for lawyers, and 1 out of 6 of the searches for some of the best legal large language models hallucinates 1 out of 6 times. And that one was from 2024. This one's from just last year. And they say somewhere around, 17 to 33% hallucination rate for the use of, again, these very expensive large language models that lawyers are using. They hallucinate a lot, even with retrieval augmented generation. So you could imagine that the free tools, the ones that you don't even pay a subscription for, they probably hallucinate even more. And we could see that by taking a look over here. I did a Google search. How many Americans experience workplace discrimination because of tattoos? And it gives me 4 to 15%, and then it provides me with this link. And if you follow this link, it's to this article here, Tattootopia. Oh, nope, not this one, sorry. This one here, Tattootopia. I don't know that source. So this is what Google is using to back up its generated fact. Let's see, where does it say 4 to 15%? Oh, right here, 15% of women. Okay, and there's no source there. So where did this come from? You can go to this source here, which is I think this. And if you were to search through this, you'll see that there are no, that's not where it goes. So the nearest linked source there, it's not there. And if you go to the one up above it, maybe one of these ones, and it takes you to this. Team Stage. I don't know what that is. They don't sound like a very credible source of information. Oh, okay. 12% of people. No citations anywhere here. I'm still not seeing that particular who's being discriminated against, right? So, there we go. 4% right here. No source for that. And you got to go down here and then look at their sources and figure out none of these, So it's not doing a good job providing you links. So if you're relying on these links like this, you better go look at them, because chances are this is not found easily over there. So they have serious limitations, as I just demonstrated for you there. Going back then, also these we're finding that ChatGPT diminishes your learning, diminishes your critical thinking. There was an MIT study in 2025. I'll provide a link for it on the page with this videos. And essentially what that study did was they took 3 different groups of people. They gave them the task of writing an essay, and then they watched their brains. They did a neural scan of their brains. The first group was allowed to use large language models. The second group was limited to classic search engine, no large language models, no AI. And then the third group just used their brain only. And you wouldn't believe it, the people who had the most brain activity, who were using their neural connectivity the most, were the third group, followed by the classic search engine. And the least brain activity was from the first group. And I'll link to it. You could watch the video on your own. It's not necessarily saying that it's making you dumb, but it is showing that it takes a lot less brain effort to use the large language models. They also had these 3 groups of people then all use large language models for a second time. So no matter what group they were in, they had all of them then write an essay using large language models, all of them one more time. And the people who did the brain only first and then tried to then incorporate a large language models, they actually performed better than everybody else, which suggests that if you are combining, using traditional research, using traditional writing, and then going to large language models, it does actually improve your performance. But relying solely on large language models probably diminishes your learning, diminishes your critical thinking. And if you're doing it because you're short on time, it's probably going to produce an inferior product. So there's a lot of problems with using artificial intelligence for your research and schoolwork, as I detailed in this video. In the next video, we're going to look at guidelines for the use of ethical and unethical AI in this course.